Sir, good morning. എൻ്റെ പേര് വിജി. ഞാൻ സെന്റ് ജോസഫ്സിൽ ബയോടെക്നോളജി ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റിലാണ്, ഹെഡ് ഓഫ് ദി ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ് ആണ്. സാറിനെ കോൺടാക്ട് ചെയ്തിരുന്നത് ഡോക്ടർ നൈജിലാണ്.
Okay.
സർ ഒരു 3 minutes കൂടെ ഉണ്ട്, അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് നമുക്ക് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാം.
No problem.
10 o'clock ആവാം. ഓക്കെ. Sir, it's 10 a.m. Shall we start?
Yes, please. Yeah, ready.
Okay, sir. Respected Principal, Dr. Sister Asha Therese, renowned resource person of the day, Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, my dear colleagues and participants, good morning. Today is indeed a day of great pride and joy for us, the Josephites, to have such an eminent personality with us to share his thoughts on the global pandemic, COVID-19. I'm sure none of us need an introduction about Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy. He is well familiar to all of us through his columns in Madhubhumi Daily and through his wise thoughts and advices on how to overcome during the catastrophes that hit Kerala. The 2018 flood, landslide in 2019, the current crisis of COVID-19. Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy is the operations manager at the crisis management branch of United Nations Environment Programme. He has got over 28 years of international experience in the field of environment and disaster management. He holds a PhD in environmental engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. He is an alumnus of the International Leadership Academy and a Bears Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley. As a post-crisis environment management expert, Dr. Muralee was involved in post-disaster response and followed in all major disasters and conflicts in this century. 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar, earthquake in Haiti, and floods in Thailand, to name a few. Dr. Muralee is one of the world's leading authority in disaster and crisis management, and therefore the most apt person for today's webinar. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a heartfelt welcome to our Honourable Resource Person, Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, on behalf of St. Joseph's College, Irinjalakuda. I would also like to extend a most cordial welcome to our beloved Principal, Dr. Sister Asha Therese, who has joined us. She is a strong pillar that always supports and encourages us to organize such endeavors. Dear participants, I welcome all of you to this webinar and urge you to make use of this wonderful opportunity to interact with Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Sister Asha Therese for the felicitation.
Respected resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, Dr. Vichimeri HOD, and other faculty members of Biotechnology Department and various participants of this webinar. Good morning, one and all. I am very happy to hear that a webinar titled COVID-19, the crisis of our times, past, present, and future is being organized by the Department of Biotechnology. The title of the webinar is found to be very apt in the present scenario. We are very lucky to get Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy as resource person of today's webinar. He is a well-known, internationally renowned expert in disaster responses. On behalf of St. Joseph's College Autonomous Irinjalakuda, I extend a hearty welcome and best wishes. I take this opportunity, the Department of Biotechnology, to conduct such a webinar which will be beneficial in the present scenario. May this webinar help us to explore into the depths of the topics discussed in the webinar. All the best, and may God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Now we'll listen to Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy. Over to you, sir.
Good morning. ഇവിടെ ജനീവയിൽ നേരം വെളുക്കുന്നതേ ഉള്ളൂ. 6 മണിയായിട്ടുള്ളൂ. I want to start by thanking the St. Joseph College for giving this opportunity to meet a lot of young people and also your faculty. I thank the principal for opening the session. And of course, I thank my niece, Purnima, who connected me, who is one of your former students and who connected me to your team. നിങ്ങളുടെ കുട്ടികളെല്ലാം തന്നെ മലയാളം അറിയാവുന്നവരാണെന്ന് അസ്യൂം ചെയ്യുന്നതുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ തുടങ്ങാം. അങ്ങനെയല്ല എങ്കിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ മതി. മലയാളം അറിയാത്ത കുട്ടികൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ തന്നെ കണ്ടിന്യൂ ചെയ്യാം.
Sir, I think some of the participants are from outside Kerala.
Oh, some of the participants are from outside Kerala. Okay, so I'll then switch to English, not a problem. So because you have a number of students online, I would start by defining why I chose the word crisis, COVID crisis of our times, instead of, let's say, the emergency of our times, or a pandemic of our times, or a disaster of our times. We all know Corona is here, COVID-19 is here, and it has been here for some time. Since December, it has been around, and since it has been very much present in our lives, in our day-to-day life. Our day-to-day life is almost determined by how Corona is moving around. So far, it has killed about 2.7, it has affected about 2.7 crore people. And it has killed about 800,000 people. I think this morning I was looking up and it's 887,000 people it have killed so far. Clearly a big event. It's an event which has not ended yet. But why do we use the word crisis instead of a disaster or an emergency? So in order to understand that, I will just give what is meant by a disaster, what is meant by an emergency, and then come to crisis. A disaster is an incident which cannot be handled by the resources available in that system. So that's the basic definition of disaster. So it is not about the number of people affected or the number of people killed or number of the area affected. It's really about whether that system can handle that. The system around it can handle it. So if there's a road accident in a village, if the village can handle the road accident, then it's not a disaster. It's of course still an accident. People are still killed, but it's not a disaster. And it goes up like that. So if you have a big plane accident and if the state can handle it, then it's not considered a disaster per se, it's still an accident. In the case of Corona, at least at this point of time, globally, it is still something which the world can handle, and the world is handling it. There were locations, there were countries, for short duration of time, they could not handle it with the local resources. Italy, for example, UK, for example. There is a brief amount of time, and it was indeed a disaster for that particular region, but not global. An emergency, on the other hand, is not about the ability of the system, but it's about the speed with which it is coming to you. In an emergency, the situation needs very rapid response. So if you have a situation where you have to make decisions very fast, then it is considered an emergency. So during the early days of COVID, it was an emergency. People had to make very rapid decisions about lockdown, about whether to declare it a pandemic, about whether to stop aircraft traffic, and so on and so forth. So it was an emergency at that point of time. But now it's no longer an emergency. Those decisions have been made. Of course, it's a pandemic. It's a disease, it's a health situation which affects multiple countries. But it is not just about health. It's about education, it's about economy, it's about employment. So there's no sector in our life which has not been affected by this situation. And that's why it's called a crisis. A crisis simply means a time of difficulty. And if there is a time of difficulty in our life, this is it. There is nobody among the 7 billion plus people in this world who is not affected. There's no place on earth. There There are more than 200 countries and territories in this world which is not affected by this crisis. So clearly, this is the crisis of our lifetime. There's no doubt about it. We don't know if something bigger than this will come in future, but certainly this is the biggest of our lifetime. But it's not just our lifetime. You take our previous generation, or you take the generation which has went through the Second World War. This is a bigger crisis than that. Of course, a lot more people died in Second World War. A lot more damages were suffered in Second World War. But in terms of geographical spread of what the crisis have gone into, Corona is number one by far. The Second World War affected a few countries in Europe, a few countries in Asia. But here, as I said before, every country, the United Nations have 193 member states, all of them affected. But there are a few countries which are not UN member states. They are also affected. There's a few places which are not yet independent countries, but territories. They are affected. There's nowhere on our little globe which is not affected. As I said, this is indeed the crisis of our lifetime. So one question which is probably in all your mind is about when will this end? Will it end in December? Will it end in next March, next June, 2021, 2022, and so on? And many people ask me this question often. Now, my feeling is that you should not expect a dramatic end to this crisis. There won't be a time when, anytime soon, when you will have a declaration saying Corona is now over. 1st of January, Corona would be over. That is very unlikely to happen. The question which people are asking is, will there be a vaccine? Because that would be a logical way to end. There are vaccine trials going on, multiple trials going on, many parts of the world. But in spite of that, for us to expect that very soon a vaccine will come, and that way we will all be immune to the disease, we are nowhere close to that. We don't even have one approved vaccine in India for us to start. And then even when we have that vaccine, it will be many months before it reaches into the 130 crore Indians or not. Not everyone will have to be injected, or to be given the vaccine, but it need to reach a lot of people. So vaccine is quite a long way away. So the third question is that when will the lockdown end? When will our life get back to normal? So the corona may not end, the vaccine may not come anytime soon. Will our life get back to normal? And this segment, there is a little bit more hope. Because what is that has gotten used to having corona around and to live with it. I'm here in Geneva, and where the rate of infection is very similar to what is in Kerala. Back to normal. Maybe I would say 80%. The public transport is fully functional. As I sit here, I can see the public transport. The restaurants are fully open. Yesterday, I had been to a museum. The museum is open, of course, with certain restrictions, but it's open. Offices are open up to 45%, and by 1st of October, that will raise to 60%. And so on and so forth. So slowly countries are getting more and more confidence to reopen their establishments, to normalize life, because there's no other choice. You cannot eternally suspend our life for economic reasons, but also for mental health reasons. The World Health Organization and many other organizations, such as the British Psychiatric Society, have said that the tsunami and the lockdown is creating or building up a mental health tsunami, which is going to follow the lockdown and the crisis. So therefore, to keep the place closed for a very long time is not a good idea. So you can clearly expect, slowly by slowly, things will open up. And you're already seeing that in India. Metro is opening up today, I think. And sometime soon, you'll see schools opening up, and at some point of time, you'll see colleges opening up, and so on and so forth. Much before we will have vaccination, and much before this crisis is over. And this is what you should be expecting. So the corona crisis itself will not end. Corona itself will not end, but life will start to get back normal. But that will not mean life will go back to where it was. That is not going to happen. The way you used to go to college and study, we will not go back there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The revolution of academics and studies going online is not something which is created by COVID. It has actually been there. At least for the last 20 years, the whole idea that educational resources should be global, open, free, has been there. The idea of massive open online courses is at least 10 years old. But our people in Kerala have been particularly reluctant to embrace these ideas, even though it is globally available. Organizations like Coursera and edX has been in operation for 10 years. And our people, both our teachers and students, were extremely reluctant to get into that. In 2014, the Kerala State Higher Education Council organized an event on globalization of education. And where we mentioned classroom, even when you go back to classroom, it won't be the same. Of course, the classroom will physically look the same, but it will be what we call a flipped classroom. That you may learn at your pace at home, and then you go to the classroom to discuss the topic. Could be any topic, it could be biotechnology. So tomorrow we are going to talk about, let's say, fermentation. So students are told, okay, tomorrow let's talk about fermentation. And each student would then go and Google fermentation and start to receive information on fermentation. So some may study the science of fermentation. Some may study the history of fermentation. Some may study the politics of fermentation. Some may study the economics of fermentation. Everyone in the same class, depending upon their own interest, will start to go in different directions. And this always happens. And we can all start to go to YouTube, and you're all given one single starting point, and you are asked to spend 1 hour on YouTube. And 1 hour later, if each of your mobile phones or iPads are checked, you would have reached completely different endpoint, because each of you would have followed a different trajectory of linking and clicking and so on. And that's exactly what will happen to your learning as well, that everyone would learn different things which interest them, things where they find it very funny, whatever. Things where they want to go. So the next day you go back to your classroom with this whole idea of discussing fermentation. There the teacher is not a person with superior knowledge or exclusive access to knowledge. There the teacher is a facilitator of discussions. And that is what is called a flipped classroom. It's a classroom where the learning has already taken place at home. But then you are coming back to the class to discuss that idea, to share experiences. And the role of teacher will change. And this is the classroom of the future. Because even as you come back to the college, this is what's going to happen. You will study more and more topics from outside. At least you start to have partially. Eventually, when the whole idea of the national credit bank for each of you start to appear as part of the new national education policy, you will be able to take courses from St. Joseph College, from maybe Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, where there's a biotechnology center, from the All India Institute of Medical Science, maybe, from Cambridge University, from Coursera, and all of them would have equivalent credit in your credit bank. So the world will become a very different place in years to come, in months to come. And it will come much faster than what you think it is. Many of what I speak now may actually look a little bit far-fetched to you. But in 2013, when I spoke about education will go online, of course, nobody believed that is going to be the case. And now it has happened. Same will happen about employment. The facility to work from home was always there. It's not something new. In 2008, I spent 1 year in Kerala working for the United Nations, but I was based in Geneva. My office was still in Kerala. My office was still in Geneva. Every morning I was working in synchronized time with Geneva. So when the crisis happened, it was very easy for me to come to Kerala and start working like that. So I arrived there on 17th of March, and within an hour of reaching Kerala, I was online and I was working. And it went on for months, and nobody would not notice a difference whether I'm sitting in Geneva, whether I'm sitting in New York, Nairobi, or Kerala. So long as you have a functional internet and reliable electricity, you could be anywhere. That's also the world of the future, which you are going to face. When you look at the current of this crisis, how well we managed as a society, there is something to be happy about, something not to be happy about. And I want you to remember that, because that will determine our future. One thing which we did not do very well was to do a collective action on this topic. Each country reacted independently to this crisis. We were going through a time for last 40 years where the borders were coming down, that the number of countries where one could travel without visa was coming down. When I started traveling internationally in 1995, with an Indian passport, you could probably go to 5 countries without visa. You could go to Nepal, you could go to Bhutan, you could go to, Maldives. But now, with an Indian passport, you can go to more than 100 countries. Not now, just before COVID. You could go to 100 countries. In December 2019, you could go to 100 countries without a visa. Or you could get a visa on arrival. And in Europe, there was no border which was visible. So you could just drive from Germany to Italy, Italy to France, France to Switzerland, without even noticing the border. In fact, when people come to Geneva, I often take them for a drive in the morning. Then we cross from Switzerland to Liechtenstein, a small country, from there to Austria, from there to Germany, have breakfast in Switzerland, a lunch in Austria, an evening coffee in Germany, and you come back to Switzerland, to Geneva the same day, and all in 9 hours. You will not even notice that you have gone through 4 countries. This was the world which we were in December. And suddenly, Corona brought back all the national boundaries. And that clearly is a crisis of our time. Why is that? That we could not act collectively. And why did we all raise our barriers again? If a crisis comes in future, will we respond like that? Should we respond like that? Or should we do a lot more collective action? So this is one crisis which we should be worried about. I will now speak about how our collective experiences is shaping the future and whether that future would be a better future. And this is applicable to the students as well as to those who are employed or those who are going to be employed, as well as old people, as well as other people, young people. So at a very personal level, all people in this world, all 7 billion of them, have an opportunity and had an opportunity to experience a sudden, abrupt, almost violent stopping of their day-to-day routine. So you were very busy doing whatever you were doing. You were busy doing studies, you are preparing to go abroad. You are very busy working. You wanted to do a lot of things with your life, but you did not have time for that. You did not have time to travel. You did not have time to do exercise. You did not have the time to practice music. You did not have time to learn new cooking because you're all busy with things which you thought were very important. And suddenly this crisis comes and it violently stops all your plans. And you then are left with a lot of plans, a lot of time in your hand. And that gives you an opportunity to recalibrate your priorities. You would have all heard of this great COVID bake-off right across the world. Hundreds of millions of people went into baking because you had time. Hundreds of millions of people started to learn new things. Online platforms like Coursera and edX. The number of people who joined there to study new things exploded. Millions of people started doing creative things, such as making a short film, such as taking photographs, such as collaborating with each other and singing, and so on and so on. So it allowed everyone in this world to do a dramatic reset of their life. It allowed you to reflect on what is important to you. And I think that is an excellent thing. But not only, that's really going to help you in the future which is coming to you, about which I will speak towards the end of my session. The future which is coming to you is one where you will have a lot more came down for day-to-day survival. And it has happened across the world. In Switzerland, where they conducted a survey, they estimate that an average person saved about 2,000 francs during 2 months of lockdown. In India, there's no such survey. But clearly, if you were to do such survey, you would find something like that is true. that we all have a lot more money to spend. Of course, a lot of people did not have their income coming in as well. But even when people did not have income, so did their expenditure go down. And not just because they did not have money. Even those people who had money really had no way to spend. And they realized that even without spending, you can continue with your life and, in fact, have a little bit of fun. That's at a very personal level. But there are also things which the government realized. Governments around the world were investing huge amount of money on things which they thought were very important. Building airports, building metros, having massive defense forces, and many other things. And then Corona comes, and then you suddenly realize that you probably did not invest enough in where it matters most, such as healthcare, such as educational infrastructure. In Kerala, for example, the school education system had invested in what they call Victor's channel, where students could be reached out by a dedicated television channel, so that from one channel you could reach 2 lakhs, 20 lakhs students if they wanted to convey one lecture. But the college system, we have not invested in anything like that. So every college, every teacher had to find ways of both creating a course but also delivering it, which is not necessary. So if you had 20 colleges in Kerala, all teaching biotechnology, the teachers could have taken turn that, okay, in this 40 lecture session, if there are, let's say, 8 lecturers, so each of them could decide to take only 5 lectures and then share the load. If you do so, you can do it better, you can spend more time preparing it, you needed less of bandwidth for each one of them because their data plans would remain cheaper, and so on and so on. But that we did not do. At the higher education level, we did not create that type of an infrastructure. I'm talking about Kerala, but if there are people who are from other states, it's also true for other states, that we did not invest enough money to create a backbone of IT infrastructure for higher education yet. At the national level, we had some, but they were not seamlessly connected to the 40,000 colleges which we have. So each of these professors had this unenviable task of trying to find online technology overnight. Governments found, and this is not just about India, about very rich countries, that they ran out of ventilators, ICU unit, and even hospital beds. So they figured out that probably they did not invest enough in those. Governments found across the world that they did not invest enough in research. And this is very applicable to your topic, such as biotechnology, that we should have invested a lot more in research than what we did. So that when a crisis like this came, now of course there are a number of universities who are working on finding a vaccine and many other solutions which are linked to Corona. But if we had invested a lot more, we'll have a lot more people joining this effort. And the chances of success would have been much higher if we had a lot more people focusing their effort. But not only. COVID is just one of the possible health crises. There are many other crises possible. There could be more virus out there. There could be existing virus which could mutate to create bigger problems. Fortunately, this crisis, the mortality rate is very low. It is 4 in the beginning, and now in India it's even 1%, and Kerala is even less than that. So it is possible that if we had invested a lot more in research, it would have made a big difference. And so that reset would come, that the governments would invest more in healthcare, more in education, more in research, and that would be a better future for sure. And I told you about the future of education. The future of education is bright. All of you are having worries and concern about how this year will go, the semester will go. Of course, very justified type of worries. But in your life, which is going to span, maybe 100 years, this is just a transient blip. 20 years from now, when you look back, you will not even notice. But you can think of this time as the best time in your life if you spend it wisely and correctly. Instead of focusing on the crisis which you are in now, instead of focusing that, oh, my semester may get delayed by a month, instead of focusing on whether I will not complete this syllabus, you think of this time as a historic time, a time which you have gone through. Somebody who is lived through First World War or Second World War. That's how you should think of that. You are living through historic times, and how you react at that time is what forms you as a person. So you have to think like that. And when you have that type of mindfulness, that instead of getting panic about the situation where you are in, instead thinking of how under this stress I am reacting, then you can turn it around. Of course, you are studying what you should be studying. But as I said, the world of learning has really opened up tremendous opportunities to you to study what you are studying in the college. Topics in biotechnology, for example, or many other topics many of you are studying, or mathematics. You would have probably heard now about Coursera, edX, and many other online universities. You would have studied about how do you do online education in a university abroad. All these things were always there, but you have really reached out and grabbed. Now that's the time for you to grab. But just don't focus on the topics which you are studying, which you should naturally study. The future belongs to those who have resilience as well as transferable skills. Resilience is an ability to survive a crisis. Crisis comes in your direction. It will beat down some people. It will impact everyone. But some of them would survive. Some of them would fall. And this is as true for individuals as for institutions as well as countries. Question you should ask, are you resilient? Would you survive this crisis? How do you become more resilient in a period of crisis? Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, if you Google, you will actually find a course on how to be more resilient in a COVID period. I'm right now studying an online course. And it's an extremely interesting course. I recommend all of you to enroll that course. It's on Coursera. It's a course offered by Professor Laurie Sanders of the Yale University. The course is about the science of happiness. It actually tells you what is the science of happiness? Why are we happy or why are we not happy? What is that is making us happy? I'm not going to give a lot about what the course is talking about. But I'll give just one example. If you got an Olympics match, you have the gold medal, the silver medal, and the bronze medal. Gold number 1, silver number 2, bronze number 3. So logically speaking, a person who is winning the silver medal should be more happy than the person who is winning the bronze medal, because silver is a better, and the person now comes second and not third. But historically and statistically, it is scientifically proven that the person who is getting the bronze medal is happier than the person who has got the silver medal. Why? Why is that? Somebody who is getting a silver medal, which is a better medal than the bronze medal, is more unhappy or less happy than the person who has got the bronze medal. And the study concludes that that's because the person who gets the silver medal is always comparing himself or herself to the person who got the gold medal. One more stretch, I could have got the gold medal. So you're unhappy. The person who got the bronze medal is thinking that, oh my God, I could have just missed this medal and I would have had no medal, no Olympic medal. So that is making him or her very happy. The point I'm making is that in this time of crisis, you should not only explore avenues, go outside your university, outside India to study new things, but also study things which are not related to your topic, but all related to your resilience and your happiness. Because at the end of the day, what matters most is not what you study in the college. It's about what type of person it is going to make you. And this is the main crisis of your times. As a student, to learn new topic, you do not need a college anymore. You can sit at home and learn anything. You can learn biotechnology, you can study neuroscience, you can study brain surgery. And I'm sure some of you would have questions as to how can you actually study brain surgery without going to college, but you can. But to become a better person, you will need a lot more than that. Colleges historically has been a place where you not only study, but also socialize. And socialization of the young is also a function of the college. And increasingly, colleges will become that type of space where it's not your main point of learning, but it's also it is going to be your main point of socialization. And you will learn, you will see, and you may not see in your time, but your colleges would see that education will become a lifelong activity. So it's not something that you do a degree or a postgraduate degree or a PhD, and then you are done with education for the rest of your life. That time when you could get one degree, and then based upon that degree, have a wonderful time, a good career for the rest of your life, that time is over. And that's over for you, for your generation. Jobs will come, jobs will go. You will not have what we call a career in future. What you will have is what we call a work life, a series of careers. You would study biotechnology. You may or may not get a job in that. You may become a journalist. You may get into films. You may continue with biotechnology research. But in due course, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, for a number of reasons, you may have to shift that career. It may be because there's no more job opportunity in that. Maybe because you have traveled, because your spouse is employed somewhere else, and therefore you are going to a place where jobs appropriate to what you studied is not available. So you move to study something else. The education will become a lifelong activity. And you will go back to college again and again. So 10 years from now, if you go to St. Joseph College, you will actually see people who are retired, 50 years plus, studying in this college. So the average age of the classroom would change dramatically from 20 years now to 30 or 40 years in 10 years' time. That's going to be the type of changes coming. And that's going to be a very good time. I mean, it's not going to be a bad time. The nature of employment would also change. The type of employment which we are used to will no longer be there. And in fact, you must know that there are tremendous revolutions happening outside COVID. We are all focused on COVID, but there are other forces at work. We are entering into what we call the fourth industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution was about steam engine. The second thing was about electricity and assembly lines. Third one was about computer and internet. The fourth industrial revolution is about artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, Internet of Things, things which you may or may not have heard. And this is going to dramatically change the employment landscape in the world. It is estimated that more than half of the jobs which we are now used to will vanish in the next 10 years. And certainly a few new jobs will come. And every job which you are now used to, which will remain, would be modified by artificial intelligence. How will you prepare for that world? Where your skills are no longer relevant, your jobs which you thought you wanted to do no longer exist, and whichever job you are going to have will be modified by artificial intelligence. That is going to be the crisis of your life. If you have not heard these words of the fourth industrial revolution, of artificial intelligence, or if you thought these are things which are so far remote that you are not going to be affected, rethink. Start to learn something about artificial intelligence. And it's not that you have to learn artificial intelligence. That's not important. What's important is to understand how that is going to affect your profession. Will you need people to do research on finding a vaccine, for example? Artificial intelligence is already designing drugs. Artificial intelligence is writing poetry, is writing movie scripts. Many things which you thought only human beings can do is done by AI. And more of this domain would be captured by them. How will you handle that? So as much as you are in Corona, as much as you are in this crisis, as much as your colleges are affected, there are bigger forces at work. And I want you to remember that. We'll just conclude by saying something about how the future could actually be a much better place. As I said, when Corona came, we have not still come back collectively to respond to that. Every country responded individually to that crisis. And that's not how it should have been. But everyone got caught and prepared. But that would change. Countries would reflect on it, and countries would start to behave collectively. So the economic stimulus package, which will come, and surely it will come, it is coming in countries, bits and pieces. But the economic thinking behind those things are collective. So countries know that even though there's a crisis, unlike a war or a disaster, there is no material damage which has happened to countries. Our airports are still there, our aircrafts are still there, our trains are still there. We can move. And not much damage has happened to people also. Majority of the people, 99.9% of our population has remained intact. They have become more reflective. They have become more thoughtful. They have probably become more resilient. But they are there. So if we collectively align them, and if they are incentivized, we can move into a higher trajectory very fast. So 2022 could be quite dramatic year of progress, even later 2021. Even as Corona is still around you, can still take off into your trajectory. Where education is much cheaper, and universal, where employment is coming home rather than you going out to reach out to employment. You'll be able to sit down in Irinjalakuda, in Tricur, in Chennai, in Bangalore, and work in China, in Japan, in Dubai, in San Francisco, in Geneva, for the organization, and you earn in various currency the value that you add to that organization. So the world could be a much better place, and that type of collective action will come. It will also change our perception about other bigger crises which is around, such as climate change. We have not been doing very well in climate change. That we have been neglecting our responsibility. People like Greta Thunberg has been saying that our generation, my generation, has failed them, and it's true. But now, suddenly we have we have learned that when faced with a crisis, people can accept extremely difficult decisions. Nobody would have imagined that the entire aircraft in this whole world would stop with 10 days notice. But we have. That we could bring an economy down to a standstill. So if climate change rise into crisis, where people can actually see it is going to affect them, people would agree to massive consequential changes in their lifestyle. That is a point where we can take some comfort that life could be better, individually as well as collectively. I would stop at this point, and I will be happy to take questions for the next 35 minutes if you have. If not, I would stop whenever your question stops. I thank you for listening to me. Over.
Thank you, sir. Now we can ask questions.
Good morning, sir. Sir, it was an amazing session. I loved the class. Sir, I would like to ask one question. It is different from COVID-19.
Yes, please.
Sir, you have traveled across the world to numerous countries. Which country do you felt is the best in disaster management, and which is not so good in that?
Thank you. The country which is best prepared, there are two. One I have traveled, one I have not traveled. One I have traveled is Japan, where children are taught from very young age, probably as early as they pick up anything, the basic principles of disaster management. And this is not something new. It's not something which they started teaching in the last 10 years or 20 years. Japan has a history of earthquakes, and then they learned how to build buildings to outlast earthquakes. Because in earthquakes, it's not earthquakes which kill people, it's the buildings which kill people. So how you build is important in terms of how many people would be dying. So if you build with big laterite block as we do, or concrete blocks, or granite, your chance of dying is much higher compared to if you die with wood. If you build with wood, because if you build with wood, the building may still collapse, but you won't die, you will have an injury. So they had that type of buildings. Even now, they build with steel, and you have magnitude 8 earthquake, the building sways but doesn't collapse. So they had the last earthquake, I think magnitude 8.2 or 8.5, which is absolutely massive earthquake. And I think it killed 3 people. A magnitude 7.2 earthquake in Haiti killed 216,000 people. So Japan has built their buildings like that. But 1,000 years before, they had, and they always had tsunamis. And when you have tsunami, the sea come onto the land and it will wipe out everything in its path. Japan has a tradition by which they will put a stone on the land where the last point of tsunami was. It's called a tsunami stone. And this is an indication because tsunamis don't come often. Tsunamis come maybe once in 1,000 years. So it's not very easy for somebody to remember where till when the tsunami came last time. So that's why historically they put these tsunami stones. And that stone told people that from this point to the sea could be affected by tsunami, therefore don't build on those. When I went to Japan after 2011 tsunami, I was taken to a place that is called a tsunami shrine, a temple. And this is 5 kilometers from the beach, 5 kilometers from the beach. And nobody believed that tsunami would have come 5 kilometers because that's too far from the coastline. But then archaeological evidence proved that tsunami had in fact come 5 years. So what I'm saying is that much before archaeology, much before science, much before codified record, they found a way to communicate the same to the future generation. We had our big flood in 1923. We knew where the water went at that point of time. We knew which temples were affected. We knew which churches were affected. But we kept no record. And 2018, we have the new flood coming. And it affects exactly the same area affected by the 1923 flood. And by then, the number of people had increased. Our wealth has increased. The number of buildings dramatically has increased. And we suffered huge 30,000 crore worth of knowledge just because our previous generation did not keep record of what happened. And we are doing the same mistake now. We are not keeping record of where the water came in 2018 so that our children, when a new flood will come, and it will come, will be affected. So clearly we are not doing very well. Japan does. In Japan, when there's a tsunami, school children are instructed that their teachers would look after them. Parents are told that you should not go to the college or the school to safeguard their children. That's the responsibility of the teachers. So the parents are supposed to look after themselves. The teachers are supposed to look after their children. And children are told to obey their teachers, what to do. Imagine a tsunami came to Ernakulam. As soon as the news of a tsunami comes, every father, grandfather, mother, they will take every possible vehicle and rush to the schools to pick up their children. And within 5 minutes, the roads will be chock-a-block. And not only the children die, but also the parents, grandparents, everyone would die. As we are not prepared enough for it. So yes, Japanese countries which is extremely well prepared. The country which I did not go, but I know is well prepared is Cuba. It's not a rich country like Japan, but they also have excellent preparation for disasters. It's community-based preparation of disasters. Before every hurricane comes, they have preparation. When hurricane comes, they know every family know exactly what to do, how to safeguard their houses, how to have provisions in their house, when to move, when to stay, how to look after for your neighbor. It's all taught. That's another country. But as a diplomat, probably I can't say which countries are not doing very well, but I always try to compare what we have in Kerala so that we are not affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Good morning, sir. It was a very informative session. I was really amazed after knowing the future aspects, which has immense potential to revolutionize the whole world. But as a research scholar, I want to know how safe will it be to return to our institutes and what protocol should we maintain, which can balance our work life as well as our health.
Thank you. In this COVID world, there's not going to be an absolute safety. You cannot say that if you do this, and this, you will be 100% safe. That will not happen. And this is true for every other aspect of our life. When you are taking your bus or train or bike to college, you are not safe. You have a statistical chance that something bad will happen to you, something terrible could happen to you. That's a statistical chance. But we deal with that. And this is exactly the case of COVID. So clearly, at this point of time, it's all about the amount of interaction you have with somebody else, the amount of time you spend with somebody else. So the number of people whom you will meet, the amount of time you will spend with them, the type of atmosphere you will be interacting with them. So if you are meeting a lot of people in a confined space, that's what gives maximum risk to you. But if you are meeting few people in an open space, then it's much less. If you are meeting few people in a confined space, then that is a risk somewhere in between. So it is based upon this broad principle that you have to start your planning. If you are going back to college, you have to think how many people will go back to college at a given time. So universities in some places are allowing 1/3 of the people to go back at a given day. And of course, add to this is your basic points, such as hand washing, such as face mask. If you have these working principles on which you act, then you can minimize the risk. So it's not really about eliminating the risk per se, that's impossible, but you can minimize the risk to the degree that statistically you can operate as safely compared to every other risk which you are taking in your life day to day, which you may or may not be knowing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I am Ramesh from Kerala Police Academy. Sir,
yes, Ramesh.
How will we far away securing a COVID vaccine? One question. Can you hear me?
No, not really.
നമ്മൾ എത്ര ദൂരം അകലെയാണ് ഒരു കോവിഡ് വാക്സിൻ കണ്ടെത്തുന്നതിൽ എത്ര ദൂരം അകലെയാണ്? രണ്ടാമത്തെ കാര്യം, നമ്മൾ ഈ സാറിന്റെ അഭിപ്രായത്തില് കേരളത്തില് ഈ കോവിഡിന്റെ ഈ പീക്ക് ഇങ്ങനെ തുടരുന്നത് എത്ര നാളും കൂടി തുടരാൻ സാധ്യതയുണ്ട്? ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ കൂടി സാറേ, ഒറ്റ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ കൂടി. ഞാൻ ആ ഇടുക്കി പെട്ടിമുടി ദുരന്തത്തില് ഡോഗിനെ കൊണ്ട് പോയിരുന്നു, റെസ്ക്യൂ ഓപ്പറേഷൻ പോയിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ സാറേ, എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ ഈ മലയോര മേഖലകളിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഈ സോയിൽ പൈപ്പിംഗ് പോലുള്ള പ്രതിഭാസം ഉണ്ടാകുന്നുണ്ടോ എന്നറിയാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഒരു ഓഡിറ്റിംഗ് നടത്താൻ സാധിക്കുമോ ലോക്കൽ ഗവേണിംഗ് ബോഡി കൊണ്ട് മലയോര മേഖലകളിൽ?
Thank you. Very good questions. The first question, I don't know, honestly. The World Health Organization has now given time, mid-2021, as an indicator of the time. But I must say that's really more like giving hope to the world that something is coming. We have heard something will come from by August, something will come by November, something will come by December, and now, next June. So when something like that come, I give it as much value to say that, okay, people are working on it, there should be a success, and we should have some hope. So that's as much as we can say. So don't count on it yet. The second question is, in Kerala COVID peak. In Kerala, we have been managing this crisis exceptionally well, right from the start. The biggest, COVID becomes from crisis to an emergency to a disaster when the number of COVID cases needing serious medical attention, such as a ventilator or an ICU support, exceed the local capacity. Local in a very local way. For example, if the number of patients needing ventilator capacity in Ernakulam exceed the capacity available in Ernakulam, then that becomes an emergency and a disaster in Ernakulam. We may still have ventilators in Trivandrum or in Kozhikode or in Guwahati or in New Delhi. That doesn't help because it has to be in Ernakulam. And moving around hundreds of patients around the state or the country is next to impossible. So what we have managed to do is to keep it much below our hospital capacity. Even now, even with all this problem, we are probably 1/5 the hospital capacity in terms of sheer numbers and probably 1/10 in terms of the ventilators needed. So we have managed to do very well. But in this process, what we have done is to suppress the peak. So when you suppress the peak, it will prolong it for a long time. If we had allowed it to evolve and go and probably even surpass our capacity, few more people would have died, but we would have passed the peak by now, as we have seen in Delhi. So while the fact that we did not peak now is a good thing, we will have to live with this current situation for some time. There was a time at which we could lock down various parts and then try to control and beat it back. But now I think that point is past. So now we have to manage the crisis as it comes, and the peak is going to be quite some way away in our case. And our effort always should be to ensure that the number of cases needing serious attention is below our hospital capacity. You had a question about the landslides and debris flow. It is true that we are having a lot more landslides and debris flow every year. It has historically always been there, but it is clearly on the rise. That's because of two reasons. One is that we are doing a lot more action on the ground, such as quarrying, such as building roads. On the other side, because of climate change, the rains are falling with a lot more intensity. So there's more rain falling in less time. As a result, there's more water getting accumulated in the hills. And clearly there should be an analysis and an early warning system. Now, you mentioned about working at the panchayat level, which is actually not the appropriate level because the technical capacity at that level is not very high. So this has to be a statewide effort from someone like Center for Earth Sciences, conducting a statewide survey, but also installing sensors in each of these vulnerable areas. And then, as the amount of rainfall exceeds a certain threshold, as the soil is starting to indicate water saturation, you give early warning to the community which is living below that area and say you move out for the time being. And this is how other countries do. But of course, the sustainable solution is not that. That's just an interim solution because people are there, because the quarries are there, because the roads are there, because the resorts have been built. In Pettimudi, none of this was the case. Pettimudi was a slightly different case. I'm just saying, broadly speaking. The sustainable solution is to ensure that people are not living in vulnerable areas or the vulnerabilities are reduced. In Switzerland, which is very identical to our high ranges, where landslides, debris flow, as well as avalanches were a big problem, what the community did 150 years back is to plant what they call a protective forest. It's a band of land So in Switzerland, the top of the hill, trees will not grow because that's covered by snow at all time. The bottom of the hill is where people live. So the middle band of the hill, so they planted trees. Whether the public land or private land, they planted trees. And cutting those trees was completely forbidden. Even if it's your own land, it is all managed by the government forest department. And this is called the protection forest. And then this protection forest acted as a buffer between the landslide or avalanche forming and the population below that. So this type of land use change is what is ultimately needed for sustainable reduction in the landslide. And that's exactly what would needed for coastal risk prevention, as well as risk prevention for flood in the middle areas. Now, if you actually build a house next to a river, there's no way in which your risk can be eliminated. You can get an early warning, you can move out a little bit, but the risk is always there. So yes, you would need a statewide map of vulnerable areas. You would need a network of early warning systems, and you would need a system of early warning, providing early warning. So even if the signals, the information go to the district headquarters and people are given that information. But you also would need more sustainable land use solutions to get around it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
sir. Sir?
Yes. Yes, Honourable.
Actually, sir, your class is really fascinating. But I think I'm not presenting you any questions, sir. But I think, sir, your class will be motivating to each and every person who was present at the meeting. I think we are blessed with the abundant natural resources, but we are recklessly using these resources. I think that is the main cause of this bringing of disaster here. We are not aware of the abundant resources within our reach. Okay, sir. We are not economically using the resources, so we are facing this sort of disaster. I think so, sir. To that extent, what we can implement any system, sir? To your opinion, sir.
No, thank you for your comments. I don't know if you are from Kerala or other part of India. If you are from Kerala, there is something which I always tell to my fellow Keralites. In Kerala, there is no shortage of awareness of environmental management or resource availability, resource conservation. So people in the hill are aware of exactly what I said, the need to have land use planning. People in the midlands are aware, people in the coastal areas are aware. But the problem is that when something hurt them personally, they're not happy. Otherwise, they're very happy. So people in the hilly area are completely, fully in support that the paddy and wetland should be conserved, the coastal mangrove should be conserved. But they do have a problem when restrictions are put on land use in the hilly areas. So that's why we saw violent reaction against Kasturi Rangan or Gadgil Committee report. And that's exactly what happens in the coastal areas. They are completely aware that the hill should be protected. But when they are told that they cannot build close to the river or close to the sea or close to the lake, they object. And same about paddy and wetland convention. Now, you cannot save your environment by at other people's cost. You as an individual also have to bear some responsibility and have some consequence of that. So it is only by collective action, not individual action, that we can get around this problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir?
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, please. If there's a moderator, they can suggest who should ask. I can see Jasmine, I can see Daphne, but Jasmine, go ahead.
Okay, sir. You were talking about the Japan model where students, kids are learning things from how to manage in a crisis situation and all. So I think it is lacking here in Kerala. So you were just discussing about people taking things personally when it comes to, though they have the awareness, when it comes to personal issues, they say that, okay, this is not possible, like that. So if this awareness is there in them from kids level onwards, if we have a proper kind of learning, this can be.
Yes.
I mean, what's your opinion, sir?
No, I agree. 100% I agree. The problem is that, I mentioned in this, at the beginning of my presentation as to, we all are very busy with our life. We all thought certain things are very important to us. Our studies were very important. Our work was very important. And we neglected probably things which are really important to us, such as our health, such as our family. And this is exactly what happened to our learning and curriculum. So we thought, studying English and mathematics and social studies and other topics are so important that we did not consider it important to study about safety, to cross the road safely, to swim safely. So every year, we have 4,000 people dying on our roads every year. 1,200 people drowning every year. And a lot of these are students. And I've been telling for at least for 10 years. My first book actually was on how to conduct a safe excursion from school. This happened after the Irinjalakuda tragedy when 18 kids died in Puduthankata. So I've been suggesting that every year, the first day of school and colleges, we should dedicate 1 hour of the time in the orientation to safety. Yes. Children are coming to school, college, to a new atmosphere. They don't know what type of risks are there in the college itself, in the school itself, and what they should do if they are faced with that risk. How do you react? The teachers don't know themselves what to do if something happens. So I had written a specific guidance only for campuses. And I said, the first day, so we now have professional home, you have papadam, padam, payasam, balloon, everything. So why don't we have a half an hour, 1 hour session on this? I've been telling for, I think 2013 is when I actually prepared the guidance. And I've met all the people. And of course, everyone thinks it's a bright idea. Now you now think it's a bright idea. But when this is presented to the school or the college, of the various other things which they have to do, this never become an important enough issue. Everything else, teaching English become an important issue. Teaching maths become an important issue. Or conducting a camp on something become an important issue, but not safety. So last year, 2019, 3 students died in school premises in Kerala. A child died during a sports event, hammer throw, in Pala. A child died in the classroom in Wayanad. A child died in a cricket field in Alapura. And suddenly, the society realized, this is a problem. But this is not new. Every June, 1st of June, when the school starts, I sit here dreading where is going to be the first death going to be reported. And you can take almost any year, always a death in the school on the way to school every year. There's a college in Kottayam where a professor opened the window and fell through the window and died. So that happens in the campuses. Even then, people don't learn. So it's not because we don't know. It's just because we think it's not important. We have just internalized 10,000 deaths per year. The 2018 flood killed 493 people total. And this is considered a huge, biggest disaster in our lifetime. And we lose 4,000 people only on the road, 1,200 people to drowning, 800 people falling from height, 700 people on the railway tracks, 250 people to electrocution, 30 people are killed by elephants every year. So there are all these disasters around us, and we don't think that's important because it has always been around us. So clearly there's a need to reset our priorities. Thank you. Daphne, you had a question.
Okay, sir. Sir, I'm a faculty of this biotechnology department itself, and here we have a question from the YouTube live streaming. Shall I read it now?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question was asked by Salvin, and the pandemic situation is adversely affecting the new job seekers. Even many are losing their jobs now. Can you give some suggestions to overcome this? This is the question, sir.
Yes, thank you. For last many years, I have been telling young people that people come to me asking whether biotechnology has good scope, or environmental science has good scope, or data science has good scope. And I always tell them that every subject has scope. It's like going to a textile shop. Now you look at the window rack and there are many colored dresses there. You like something and you take it. That doesn't mean that whatever other cloth remaining has no other takers. There are takers for that as well. So every topic has scope. But the real question is that what maximizes your scope? And that's unique to you. And what matters most is not what you studied, but where you studied. No, what matters is not what you know, but whom you know. This is the future. Your future is about the networks you create. And the new generation, I don't have to tell you how to create networks, but I want to tell you that networks are the most important thing. So where you study gives you a set of network. Where you are born naturally gives you the network. Now, this is not our choice. We are born where we are born. You are born in United States, you are born in India, you are born in UAE, and also which family you are born into. That creates another set of network. You are born to a rich family, poor family, well-connected family, film stars family, whatever. So that gives you a network. But these are not our choice. So whatever comes by birth is a bonus. But there are things of your choice. Which college you go is your choice. And that creates your first set of networks, with school included, but college is more important. So I tell people that given a choice between doing engineering in a college in Kerala and doing something like economics or history in St. Stephen's in Delhi, or commerce in the Sri Ram College, or English in Stella Maris College in Chennai, I would recommend those than doing engineering. Even though engineering, computer engineering as a subject itself may be more interesting. In terms of maximizing your career opportunity, where you study and what network you create is important. So, one solution. If you are, when you go to an institution which gives a better network. Not even go to St. Stephen's College. So, how do you create your network? That's how you have, if not social media. Identify the institutions and individuals where you want to study, where you want to connect it to. Slowly build your network. You build your network among professionals. Build your network among academicians. You build your network among companies. You follow them. You post your own observation, but also observation from others. You join the events. LinkedIn is also a university at this point. You learn from them. Slowly, you will be building a network around you. And the jobs will start seeking you than you seeking the job. And this is already happening. In many parts of the world, people are not going after jobs. Jobs are looking for you because they know you. they know your network. They know you're active in this topic. And that helps you to get your job. So create your network either by going to better institution or a LinkedIn, but constantly reaching out. I have 1 more minute, so I'll tell you just one more thing. All of you are on social media, and you all assume that your Facebook or Instagram is your private space, and therefore it has no impact on your employment potential. And you are completely wrong. Employers around the world are looking at your social media profile, just as your boyfriend or girlfriend or their families are looking to see what are your views and who are your friends. You may like it, you may not like it, but that's a fact. So what you post on these platforms would have an impact, and mostly a negative impact, on your career prospect. So as much as time you spend on LinkedIn and to build your network, if you then spend time with extreme political, extreme religious, extreme sexist views on your Facebook, or you do not have a Facebook account, or you only do share articles, then you also have a negative impact on your career. Thank you. It's 8 o'clock, so I will have to stop now. I want to thank you all for staying with me and also the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Will you stay just for 1 more minute?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I now request Dr. Kavita to sound the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Distinguished Chief Guest of the Day, Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, respected Principal Dr. Sister Asha Therese, Head of the Department, Dr. Viji, my dear colleagues, friends and students, good morning to all. It is my privilege to propose vote of thanks on this occasion. We have a very informative and interactive session on COVID-19. I wonder how effectively he explained the impact of this pandemic on our present and future. When it comes from an internationally renowned expert in disaster response, like our Honourable guest, Dr. Muralee sir, it attains a different dimension. What he discussed in the last 1.5 hours is groomed from his long experience as the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction in the UN Environment Programme. On behalf of Biotechnology Department, St. Joseph College, Irinjalakuda, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, sir, for the informative and thought-provoking address. I would like to express our profound gratitude to our principal, Dr. Sister Asha Therese, for her constant encouragement and presence in the webinar. I would also like to thank our head of the department, Dr. Viji, for her support and guidance. The efforts taken by Dr. Nigel George, without which this event cannot be possible, are greatly acknowledged. It requires a special mention to Ms. Purnima Gobi, our former student and faculty, who played a role behind the curtain to organize this function. Thank you, Ms. We are greatly honored by the active involvement of all the participants of this webinar. I express my deep sense of gratitude to each and every one of you. Finally, I am happy to express vote of thanks to all faculty, staff members, and students of our department and college for making this a grand success. Once again, I thank all of you. Thank you. Before leaving, please fill the feedback form in the chat box so that you can get your certificate. Thank you.